Welcome to the 101 Ways podcast and our way to give back to the tech community. This episode, the topic is AI, implementing it, and lessons learned. And with 101 ways to solve any problem, we hope you'll find the right expertise here to solve yours. And of course, don't forget to follow us on Spotify, on YouTube, or wherever you listen so that you know when new episodes are released. So I'm your host today, Ollie Happy. I am product principal at 101 Ways. This week I have a co-pilot. My co-pilot is John Parish, engineering principal. Welcome, John. And we are joined with Glen McCracken. Glen is head of data analytics and automation at Ion Analytics. Welcome, Glen.
Thanks, Ollie. And hello, John.
Oh, great to have you here. So the logical place to start before we get into the good stuff of data and AI is with a bit about you. So tell us the Glen story.
The Glen story, well, you might, the more I talk, the more people will pick up on my slightly funny accent, although in the context of the coast, it's not as funny as some. So I was born in New Zealand. For my undergrad, I studied to be an actuary. So my father was a maths teacher and also did computer science. So I loved problem solving. I loved using a little bit of code, and just having the satisfaction of knowing that you can, in a quantitative sense, crunch some numbers and get to a good end result. So I studied applied statistics. I studied corporate finance. I did a week worth of work experience as an actuary, and it was terrible. I didn't like it at all. So I went to the dark side, which was consulting. So I did consulting for about 10 years. I started with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I did a lot of kind of what people would call AI now, but back then was just statistics and the emerging field of data science. So we did a lot of image classification. We did a lot of spam filters and classification, bots. We did a lot of kind of financial modeling. And then over time, I moved into digital transformation. So I worked with companies that were moving out of kind of the old way of doing things and embracing technology to either grow at scale or cut back on their costs a little bit and automate. And I did that for a number of years. And that culminated in working for Eden Park when they were hosting the Rugby World Cup in 2011. So I looked after the technology overlay, and it was fantastic to see kind of all the ways you can utilize technology to maximize the fan experience, and also make sure that people are safe and kind of cared for. So we did, turnstiles and CCTV and just everything that you could imagine to minimize the amount of manual effort that was required to safely host 60,000 people and then have, I think, 50 million people watching the event as well.
And just for the uninitiated, Eden Park is New Zealand's Wembley.
Yes, it is. It is. So I had fun doing that. I got onto the advisory board for Cisco for sports and entertainment. I came across to Wembley and Olympic Stadium in the lead up to the Olympics, and the maximum capacity of Eden Park is 60,000 for Wembley and Olympic Stadium. I think it's 90,000 and 80,000 respectively. So it was a much larger scale. My wife came across with me, and we just fell in love with the UK, and we said we would definitely move here. So 2 years later we did, with our 4 children, and the kids at the time ranged from 14 down to 6. So they're now 24 down to 16. So we've been here exactly 10 years. And I kind of got back into my data and analytics roots. I joined a company called Dealogic. It was quickly acquired by Ion, who was an acquirer by nature. They've acquired around 40 odd companies over the last 25 years. And Ion is very much driven by leveraging automation to benefit its clients. So the division I work within is called Ion Analytics, and my role, as you said, is head of data analytics and automation. And data analytics, we have a number of different clients. There are investors, there's advisors, there's law firms, there's investment banks, and there's corporates. And all of them are trying to use data in a way so they can be more effective in their role. And my role is the inward-facing element of that. So how do we use data within Ion Analytics so that we can grow at scale, so we can be more operationally efficient, so our salespeople can be more effective in what they do. Our support people can be more effective in what they do as well. And yeah, so it's a fun role. We've got about 15 people in the team, spread across from Houston to London to Mumbai in India. And yeah, I live day to day figuring out how we can leverage technology and specifically data just to have a bit more fun at work and be a bit more effective in what we do.
Thank you. And maybe just for listeners that haven't listened to an episode with you, John, perhaps you could just give us a 60 seconds on John and how you've come at the data and AI world.
So, yeah, as Ollie said, I'm a principal engineer at 101 Ways. I've done all sorts of aspects of software engineering. I've been mostly developer. I've done a lot of sysadmin and networking. I've had a period as doing QA and testing. So I've had a lot of aspects of engineering throughout. My background's actually in the sciences, so I kind of my sort of educational training was more in statistical analysis. I've always been quite interested in it. And when I guess it was around 2015 to 2017, as AI and machine learning started getting going with libraries like TensorFlow, I got really into that and just started doing a lot of home projects. I took a lot of courses, and I've never really left it since. For me, it was kind of a nice confluence between my interest and job, which is my hobby, which is computing, matched with my background, because I like the number crunching. I guess I'm quite unusual with that.
This is a safe place for both of you. I'm fascinated with it.
It's good to feel safe.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. All right, good. So let's now talk about the analytics journey for you at Ion. And I know it started pre-acquisition, but if you want to just give us a little bit of an insight of where things began for you there, Glen, and then we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, so I suppose it's interesting working for a company that is passionate about data. So we sell data and we sell the insights derived from that data to our clients. And so in that way, the culture is a little bit different. So when I joined Dealogic originally, they had 30 years worth of transactional information related to all the different M&A and debt issuance. And what was interesting was that they already had very strong disciplines in place with respect to how should we govern the data, the concerns around permissioning and data privacy. They had already quite advanced thoughts around data engineering and reproducible data pipelines. They had a notion of data quality and understanding the difference between, or what makes up data quality being timeliness and the breadth and the depth and the accuracy and the reconciliation to independent third-party sources. So it was very interesting moving into quite a rich, mature environment. Now, I say that because if you've ever gone to a builder's house, you'll know that they traditionally will build fantastic buildings, but their own houses will not always be as finished and complete as they could be. And Ion Dealogic was quite similar, very mature from an outside perspective, and there are a few things which we could have done a bit better from an inward perspective. Fast forward a few years, when Ion acquired us, we eventually became Ion Analytics, and it was the culmination or the merger of three different entities, which then became four different entities. So we had Dealogic, which had a very rich, vast data set, and was pretty strong with respect to the data engineering and data automation elements. We had Accurus, whose go-to-market brands were Mergermarket and Debtwire and 14 other different sub-brands. They were also very strong from a data perspective, weren't quite as sophisticated from a data engineering, data automation perspective, but they had a phenomenal editorial capability through having 350 journalists. So they took data to the next level. They had a very strong qualitative aspect to it, where you had people writing about all these different things and then tagging it back to the data. And then we acquired a company called Celerity, which was a text mining and natural language processing company. And so the three of those combined formed Iron Analytics, and then we acquired a CRM provider out of Chicago called Backstop Solutions a couple of years ago. And so now you've got this really interesting situation where you have probably 17 to 18 legacy companies that have been brought together, and all the challenges that come with having lots of legacy systems. Lots. You have a degree of overlap in the services that we're providing our clients and the data that we're providing our clients. So there is a need to rationalize, but also be mindful of the fact that much like the Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, we don't want to kind of destroy some of the revenue we're making by just turning certain things off. We want to somehow migrate our clients onto next generation platforms that have all the benefits of the collective synergies of why we acquired all the companies in the first place. So yes, a really interesting balancing act of how do we make sure that we maximize the value that our clients get out of our data, whilst we kind of fix all the internal things and try and realize the synergies that we hoped for in all the acquisitions, and then also try and figure out how do we kind of selfishly use the data for our own benefit as well, so that we can grow and be more efficient and kind of maximize the way in which we're eating our own dog food, so to speak.
Yes. Thank you. Can we just take a moment in terms of definitions? And would you mind defining the differences in your mind between data automation and data engineering, just for folks who may not have come across those terms before?
Yeah, so I suppose data engineering is a very nice broad umbrella term that I would characterize as basically getting data from one place to another. So it may well be that you've got data in a third-party system like Salesforce, and you want to get that data into a central data lake and combine it with other data sources so that you can stitch the data together into some way and derive insights from it. So in my world, we would class the writing of any APIs or the building of any data pipelines as being data engineering. So basically, how do we get the data into an accessible, democratized, secure, permissioned environment that people can benefit from? Data automation for us is in some way almost a subset of that. So in the old days, you would have people that would manually key a lot of information. These days, you have filings through SEC and other regulators that are required that are accessible via websites. So you can pull that data down manually, one at a time, and then rekey it, or you can build a degree of automation that allows you to either scrape the content or pull the data down and then make structure out of the unstructured. So in many cases, the filings or PDF documents will be in a relatively unstructured format. They might follow a loose structure, but the metadata or the fields themselves are not always formatted in a way that makes them easily readable. So in our world, we kind of refer to the data automation element as automating that traditional manual activity of sourcing data and extracting the value or the metadata or the fields from it, and then pushing it through that data pipeline that I described.
Right, right. And John, that's also where I know you often start with clients, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Data cleanliness is so vital as a base for anything with this.
Yeah. What do you have? Where is it stored?
Yes.
How are you processing it? And do people have access to it, right?
Yeah. In fact, you mentioned that you had data going back, I think, as much as 30 years, Glenn. So in companies where I've seen where they do have a long history of data, it's often that metadata that's lost. I mean, people talk about data rot, but in practice, it's normally that the definitions for which data was recorded are lost over time, and so it's harder to use that old data. But you also said that you had sort of strong data governance in place, which I don't know whether that's rare, but it's certainly not the most common scenario that I've come across. So that probably helps. But did you have any particular difficulties with some of the older data?
Yeah, I suppose in the perfect world, you would extract every nuanced piece of intelligence out of the data. And I think we were lucky in the sense that over the many years in which the data had been collected, the subset of information that was most valuable, and this is kind of where the Pareto rule comes in. So probably 20% of the fields within the data we had provided 80% of the value. So in that sense, when we're looking at transactional information, if we know the target, if we know the acquirer, if we know the date, we know the value, if we know the third parties that were involved, if we know the advisors, if we know the law firm that was involved or the investment bank, if we know the industry, the geography, there's a relatively finite set of fields of information that you need to know that hasn't really evolved much over time. Now, the great thing about generative AI that we'll no doubt get to is that most data that organizations have is in unstructured format. And to get the value from it takes a lot of investment, and it takes years of investment and years of refining. Whereas generative AI, some of the language models that we now have access to, shortcuts a lot of the processes required to extract that value, extract that data. So in the days where if we wanted to get a lot of information out of these unstructured PDF files, and we had to write our own code and kind of and do image recognition and tokenization and text mining and all these intricate kind of complicated methods in which to extract it, now we can kind of throw it into an LLM and get that in a very short space of time. So I suppose, yeah, I think we would consider ourselves a little bit rare with respect to the degree to which we took data governance so seriously, and I suppose we were getting payback for that for a long period of time, because we understood the value of data, and the way in which we approached it meant that we could get a lot of value from that data and in turn pass that on to our clients. And now we're in an interesting position where a lot of startups and new entrants to the market can potentially catch up pretty quickly by leveraging some of these LLMs.
And when we were first talking together at the breakfast the other day, what kind of really interested me was, apart from your excellent accent and background and growing up in the right city in the right country in the world, it was the fact that it feels a bit like you were quite privileged in starting kind of at step two. If step one is clean thy data and get the bedrock ready, then you were effectively building on that platform, as you say, understanding the commercial value of data externally to clients and also internally for efficiencies. So I think that gives a lot of folks listening a view into step two, into what the near future could look like should they invest in getting their data all settled and normalized and ready to use. So let's talk a little bit about some of the projects and some of the steps along the way that you've worked through. And I know you've shared a few of them with me in the past, so I'll hand it over to you to start where you will, and we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, so I suppose we could split it into the external ways in which we leverage data, and then the internal ways. And so if I start with kind of the traditional AI, or when I was growing up, it was called statistics, but we kind of skipped through the data science phase, and now we're calling it AI, or traditional AI. So in a traditional AI sense, you can imagine with a large set of data, the way we think about our clients is the job they're trying to do, the problem they're trying to solve. So if we think about the capital markets and how the capital markets work, you've got corporates that have got a need for money, and you've got investors that have got money and a need for return. And then you've got these intermediaries, whether it be investment banks, law firms, or advisors. And so the way in theory things work is you have these intermediaries that are saying, who are the corporates that are likely to come to market and want to transact? And also, who are these investors that are potentially going to come to market and want to get a return? And then you have the corporates saying, who are the right advisors I should be using? And you have the investors saying much the same thing, who are the right advisors I should be using? So from a job to be done perspective, it's reasonably clear that origination and how these parties find themselves is something that's super important. And when you have this rich set of data that we do, and we provide to all of those segments I just referred to, the lazy approach is to say, here's the data, good luck, and try and find yourself. And the more sophisticated approach is similar to what you see with these dating websites, where you're seeking to match commonalities and communities together. So you've got one person that wants something, and you have someone else that has those attributes. So what we do is, for our clients, we leverage the data in the same way. So we use predictive models. So actually survival analysis. So logistic regression normally isn't time sensitive. So it's not interesting for us to know if a client will or corporate will transact or not. It's more important that they will transact and when. So what we do is we look at certain events that could occur, such as corporates coming to the market, bond reissuance, so they have funds available to them that they've borrowed and they're going to renew those loans, IPOing, transactions. If you look at the other side of the fence, the investors and the private equity and venture capital firms, in some cases there might be sponsor exits, so they've held the company for a certain period of time and now they're going to come to market and transact. So outwardly, we're building more predictive and prescriptive insights over the data we have, so our clients don't have to do all that work themselves. They can utilize some of the data science and AI that we've applied over the top of that data, so they can look at specific things that are of interest to them. And then internally, we do much the same thing. So how do we know the jobs that we have that need to be done? So we know that we have people visiting our website. In some cases, they sign up for demo or attend one of our events. They might trial one of our products. We know that there's a large number of them, and a subset of them will eventually convert into being paid customers. So we use logistic regression in this case for lead scoring. So we want to understand, of the leads that are coming in, what are the attributes about those leads that may raise the likelihood that we would be able to transact with them in some way. And again, because we've been around for a while, we have lots and lots of data associated with that. We also look at ways of mitigating risk. So we have years and years worth of data associated with attributes about the companies that are our clients, and also the behavioral characteristics. So we see what their usage is doing, how many times they're reading emails that we send them, alerts or marketing information. We see them attending our events and other such things. And so what we can do is we can stitch all that data together and say which clients are likely to churn. So where do we see risk based on behavioral changes or attributes associated with the company itself? And then there's a whole bunch of other internal ways in which we use the data, from segmenting customers in the first place to deriving the classification that I referred to. Are they a corporate? Are they an investor? Are they a law firm? Are they an advisor? To looking at subsegments. So an investor is a relatively broad term, but within investors, you have asset managers, you have hedge funds, you have private equity and venture capital, all very nuanced in the types of jobs that need to be done. So again, we use classification and clustering algorithms to help us derive richer information about those clients. I could go on and on. We're very much immersed in the AI Kool-Aid. Another example is network analysis, where you can look at, when you have parties that transact, you can understand kind of both sides of the fence and the intermediaries. So you can build these what's called graph databases, which were made famous by the Panama Papers, if people want to look that up. And you can understand the nature of the relationships and the forming of communities of interest. And those communities of interest are really interesting, because if you combine that with association rules or recommendation systems, you can say, if I transact with these types of clients or these specific clients, are there other people within that community that are very similar to the ones I'm transacting with? So it's a great way of understanding new logo acquisition and kind of untapped parts of the market that you may not have been aware of, for clients that share very, very strong attributes to the ones you've already had successful relationships with. So we use it from a marketing perspective, a sales perspective, a operations perspective, anomaly detection from a finance perspective. We arguably use it. If there's a place where we can use it, then we try and shoehorn it in to see if we can use it.
Excellent. And again, I think probably a window into the future, when more traditional businesses that didn't start off being data driven, if you will, go down the path of working out what what the technologies available today allow, and beginning to build the teams and the processes, getting their data right, and starting to pick off use case by use case.
Yeah, it's a really, I touch on that for a moment. So what I found is there's a really interesting cycle at play. So if you would have asked me a couple of years ago, how's your data? How is your discipline around data? I would have said, you know what, to be modest, 9 out of 10. I think we're right up there. If you'd asked me today, I'd say we're sitting at about a 6. And that's not because the data has become worse. It's because I've moved from being subconsciously incompetent to being consciously incompetent. So when we weren't using it to the degree that we were using it, we thought it was pretty good. And from a fit for purpose perspective, it was very good. The more we used the data, the more we relied on the data, the more we used it within these models, the more we realized the data can never really be perfect. And it was good enough for us to get started. And the challenge we have now is investing in the foundational, getting the data better so we can get more value from it, whilst in parallel investing in all the shiny things that use the data that would be even shinier if the data was better. And so the balancing act we have now is, in a way, as a team, we've exposed the quality of the data even more by using it in all these models. So before, it would be difficult to find the nuances of errors or inaccuracies or discrepancies within the data. But now when a client director comes in, a salesperson comes in, and it's telling them, here are the top 3 clients we should be concerned about from a renewal perspective. They might be at risk. Let's make sure we reach out to them and invite them to some webinars and so forth. And they say, wait a minute, this one we renewed this client like 6 months ago. This one's not at risk at all. I met with their CEO just a couple of weeks ago. Everything was fine. And when you start digging into the data, you find like little things about it that in turn have crept into the model, that in turn has said to the model, "No, this client's at risk." So we're in I used to feel hypersensitive about the models we delivered exposing us. And now I love it because we've effectively crowdsourced data quality. So instead of a small group of people being concerned about the quality of data, now everyone's looking at it. And it's no longer a kind of a gotcha mentality. It's we've found something else. This is great. Now we're going to improve the data most of the time.
An
Sometimes
opportunity to fine tune.
an opportunity to improve the data and fine tune it. Sometimes it's a little bit gotcha when we should have really fixed something and it slipped through genuinely. But it's an very interesting cycle to go through where you think you've got good data, you start getting into the more sophisticated uses of the data to realize the data is not really that good, but it was good enough to get started. And now you have to invest in the data and chase after the shiny things that we love working on as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it, John? And an important point, because it would be easy to say, start with the data, get it clean, and then just roll out AI. And perhaps you start with some machine learning and some predictive analytics and the sorts of tools that Glen's been talking about. But you need to go back to the data again. Of course, that, as we're hearing, is not the case, right?
Yeah, and I find that fascinating as well, that sort of feedback loop, because one of the challenges with clean data and machine learning and any of the generative AI stuff is the verification side. How do you know your data is clean enough? How do you know what steps you need to take to improve data cleanliness? How do you know that the models are picking up all of the things of importance? And that feedback loop is quite difficult to do. And it's really interesting that the way you've got that sort of almost end-to-end flow to double back to the start. I think that's really important to get a data pipeline working efficiently.
Yeah, and it's very similar to the model of continuous improvement that happens in the building of all software, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose if I cast my mind back to the good old days when you had data gatekeepers. So if you wanted a report or if you wanted data in some way, you would go to the central team. You would say, "Please, sir or ma'am, can I have some data?" And within a week, maybe you'd get an extract of the data in a spreadsheet or something. If there was an issue with the data, you probably asked for it wrong. or maybe there were underlying data quality issues, but because you were kind of far removed from the data itself and you were reliant on these kind of siloed extracts, in many cases it was difficult for the business to actually understand how good is the data, or like what are the data quality issues. And to be honest, they were probably just gleeful and glad to have access to any data. And now that you've had this movement towards data democratization, you've had the rise of these phenomenal cloud-based tools, and your Databricks and Snowflakes and so forth built over the top, where you now have people within the business that in the past would never really have access to raw data. Not only do they have access to the raw data, but they can build their own kind of predictive models and reconciliation and checks on top of the data. So what I love about data democratization is it's in turn democratized and effectively crowdsourced data quality, so that if you have many, many sets of eyes on the data, you have a much higher chance, as long as you have the right kind of processes in place, you have a much higher chance of iteratively improving that data. And as you said, Ollie, like the Kaizen type continuous improvement that many organizations aspired to in the 80s, which I think is having a bit of a revamp now, as they realize that all those principles are just as applicable to the data side, as opposed to just manufacturing or kind of process organizations.
So where would you start if you didn't have data as a primary revenue stream, and if you had if you knew that there were silos of data, perhaps you had Databricks or Snowflake or something similar in place, and the board had come to you and said, "What's our AI strategy?" What would you do first?
Yeah, you know I love the term AI strategy. So I will respond to that and then jump on to the answer. So I don't believe in AI strategies. I think the term I use is an AI strategy is like having a PowerPoint strategy. So it doesn't make sense. Like, and an AI enabled organization is like an Excel enabled organization. So AI is a tool. It's a phenomenal tool. And people should definitely understand how to use it, but in the context of what they're trying to achieve. So I think if the board or the exec came and said, there are specific outcomes that we want, or we have a problem, or there's something we want to achieve. And I suppose in my mind, if you were in the situation that you described, so you had some data in place, you had some tools in place, such as a Databricks or a Snowflake, where you've got the infrastructure you need. I would say there's kind of two types of projects you can do, and those are push projects and pull projects. So the pull project is where the business says, I want something. And the great thing about those projects is that if you think about kind of Kotter's change model, in order to successfully implement change, the organization either needs to want the change, or there needs to be some sort of compelling reason why they have to change. The wanting the change is far stronger. So if someone comes to you and says, look, we're inundated with leads, but we just don't know what to do with them. We get them all the time. We spend all our time kind of just, process them. Half of them we just leave by the wayside because we, again, just don't know what to do with them. Have you got something to help us? That type of pull project where you can say, yeah, we can overlay some technology on this, we can do something smart with AI, means you've already got kind of the coalition of the willing that you need in order to, once you've built the solution and iterated upon it, those people will be passionately involved in making sure that it works and will help disseminate that automation or that technology out to the business. If you have a push project where the board or potentially someone who's disconnected from the organization says, we need to do this, and your job is to try and force it on the business, then that is a whole different type of project. And as good as you can build an AI model that can help address some of those challenges, the project will never fail because of the technology. It'll fail because of the inability to push it upon the business. So I think my suggestion would be to find pull projects. So find projects that, not necessarily the board, but that the organization as a whole desperately has a need to fix. so that you can get all the buy-in that you need and all the support that you need from all the passionate people within the organization to ensure that whatever you do is a success. Um, I can safely say I've never worked on a project that's failed because of technology, ever. There's always a way to fix it. I've worked on so many projects where the business rejects it, the scope was poorly defined,
The market changes.
the market changes, the stakeholder management was terrible, all the soft kind of people type things that you can circumnavigate if you have many of them, if you have a pull project. So something that the business actually wants, desperately wants, would be ideal, and something that you're confident that you can leverage the data you have in order to provide some sort of solution that they're going to love. And that's also the most fun type of project you can have as well, where it's it's going to fundamentally make a difference, and people are going to love the end result as well. So that would be my suggestion. Find a pull project.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. And John, what I find really interesting listening is that Glen's not talking in buzzwords, and actually beneath the AI hype are a whole series of different tools that he talks about deploying much in the same way as we would deploy any of our kit bag of tools when it comes to software.
Yeah, and and I really like that concept of find pull projects, because as you both said, it's a tool, right? It's a very capable tool. I don't think we've sent it out the full extent of the capabilities yet, but it's just a tool. It's not. I find any hype cycle in computing, well, in anything, is generally unhelpful. But it's looking at the business value underneath that is what everybody should be focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a really nice quote as well that I like, where when talking about data visualizations, it says a good visual representation or a good graph is like a good joke. If you have to explain it, then it's not good. And I think and in some way, AI projects or any technology project for that matter, if you have to, it's like a good joke. If it just makes sense, if it's intuitive, if it resonates, if people can understand why you're doing it, the benefit it's going to derive, then it's good. If it has to be explained time and time again because it's overly complicated, or the stakeholders or even the developers on it are making it complicated by using lots of buzzwords, then it's not a good joke. People don't have to make these things complicated. AI has been around since like 1956. It's been around a really, really long time. I think people that are new to the field may feel that they need to use complicated terms, and either to convey that they know what they're talking about, or for people to take them seriously. But AI is not complicated. It's a natural extension to the data you have. People that are using Excel right now are probably using AI to a degree. In fact, Excel's got some phenomenal fuzzy matching capability that uses Liechtenstein distancing, Jaccard coefficients, and cosine similarity. You don't need to know what Liechtenstein, cosine, or Jaccard is. You just need to know that if you say equals and then put fuzzy match, it'll just match it. It'll do magic. So I like talking geek with people if we're both geeky, but if we're not geeky, then it's the conversation is far more rewarding for everyone if you just talk in business terms, in problems that people have, and in ways in which technology can help. And AI is no different. It's another tool which has been there for a while but is coming to the surface. And what I love about it is it's followed the same cycle that every other B2B type technology has failed in the past at doing. So when people talked about cloud computing in the early days, organizations said, no, we'll never do it. We'll never go to the cloud.
I
And
remember.
then Dropbox, Evernote, Google Drive, all these consumer technologies came along and said, yeah, the cloud's fantastic. We can use the cloud. And then there was this groundswell of consumer-led adoption within businesses to say, why can't we move to the cloud? It's good enough. Dropbox is good, Evernote's good. And we're seeing the exact same thing. We've seen consumers never really knowing at mass what AI was. And the knowledge was held within a relatively small portion of the population that very large companies kind of had access to. And then GPT came along and everyone knows what AI is. And you're seeing the exact same thing. You're seeing forced business adoption because the consumers all now know what it is. And it's phenomenal. It's amazing that boards are saying, what is an AI strategy? Like I'm a little bit naughty when I say we shouldn't talk about that. We should talk about it. Everyone should be talking about AI so that we can get the groundswell that's required for companies to invest in AI so that we can be more effective, so that we can adopt this technology that is mature and get some phenomenal benefits from it. So yeah, I do like using buzzwords, but only when the buzzword is reciprocated.
Yeah, fair enough. Could you give us another example of perhaps internal efficiency, maybe from the sales and marketing side or some other area of the business where if you just break it down into how you responded to a business problem and what you layered in place to make a good result?
Yeah, so a good example of that would be something we actually did at the hackathon last September. So one of the challenges that the marketing organization has is that it realizes if I send a generic marketing message to everyone, so if I treat everyone as just one big group, it's okay. You get an okay response. If I then break that message down into the different segments that we serve, the message that I would give a law firm might be different to one that I give an advisor or an investment bank or an asset manager. And then if I break it down again and say, well, the message that I give within the asset manager, a hedge fund message versus private equity versus venture capital versus a law firm. And in advisors, you actually have consultants. You have like stock exchanges. There's a whole bunch of stuff we lump into advisors. The nuance of the message is going to be very different. And then if I go one more level and say, but if I was sending it to say the CEO of a asset management firm or an analyst or a managing director, so the seniority as well kind of should help tailor the message that I'm going to send. That would also make a difference. So now you have this an emerging problem for the marketing team. If they want to maximize the amount of message they want to send out, they could just use one bucket, but they know it's not going to be very effective. If they start breaking it down into more narrow categories and then hyper-personalizing, they know it's going to be extremely effective, but at a cost. And so where AI comes in is in a couple of different ways. So in the first way, if you can segment the customers and also understand from their title, so using a basic classification, you can look at someone's title and say, are you senior, are you in the middle, or are you junior? Using, again, a classification system, you could look at the companies that we're looking at, how do I break them into asset managers or hedge funds or venture capital or private equity? And there's lots of data you can pull for that. You can look at company information, you can look at their LinkedIn page. And then so the last piece of the puzzle would be if I could understand the nuances and put people into these little small categories that I know if I tailored a message to, it would be hyper relevant, and they're more likely to say, oh, this is a message for me, not just some generic one. Then I know I'm going to be more effective. And that's when Gen AI can come in. So you can literally say, I am targeting a asset management firm, specifically a venture capital company, someone in an analyst position in North America with this. This is my product. This is the benefit it provides. Write me an email copy that will resonate with it, with a call to action to say, come to one of our events or download this white paper. And so that's a way in which you can leverage AI and generative AI, so traditional AI and generative, to create a hyper-personalized outbound marketing campaign that's tailored to almost the individual, that's going to give you far better open and click-through rates than just a generic one that's sent to, dear sir, madam, we have something we think you should buy. Do you want to buy it?
And what was the result?
So our click-through rates, in some cases, our click-through rates increased sevenfold. So I think on average it was between 3 and 7-fold increase in click-through rates. And again, when you have a precious resource, which is people, and you want to be effective, then often technology is the best way to allow a small group of people to be extremely effective. So I would characterize the work that we did with the marketing team as a great example of leveraging technology to do exactly what it should do. So taking the robot out of the human and allowing the human to add the most value they can by reviewing and briefing and kind of massaging and adding value to that process, not doing all the grunt work associated with making that hyper personalized text available to each very small group or cohort that we identified.
Interesting. So, John, what's going through your mind hearing that story?
Quite a lot of enthusiasm, actually. I guess, I mean, it's I completely agree with everything you said. I guess one of the things I'm curious about, because I'm seeing quite a lot few companies. I think we all in one-on-one do see a lot of companies who are not as far along the journey as you are. But if do you have any hints or suggestions or sort of first steps if a company perceived a poor need, as you said, to take the first steps, but really didn't know where to start? Any thoughts on sort of how you begin on that journey?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, the best way is getting help. So even if you have people internal to organization that have, dabbled or may even kind of know what they're doing, they may not actually have a broad understanding of the best way of doing things. And the payback you get from getting someone to come in to help you with best practice far outweighs kind of the bumbling through trial and error process and the mistakes that you can make. So my suggestion would be find someone who knows what they're doing. You don't have to bring them in for 5 years. You could bring them in for the first couple of projects. You could get your team to shadow them and learn a lot of the knowledge that they're picking up. But the benefit of bringing in a third party that's been there, done that, is that it saves so much time in the medium to long term. And in the short term, it might feel a little bit more painful because you feel like you could have hacked it together. But the benefits you're going to get, both in terms of the learning curve and the avoidance of pain, and the benefits in the sense of the benefit realization of the project actually having a higher chance of succeeding, will far outweigh any cost you're going to outlay on that. So just get help, get someone to help you, and obviously maximize the knowledge transfer so that your own teams can be built up to do the same. But yeah, if this is the type of technology where you want to get someone who knows what they're doing.
Thank you. Talk to us a little bit about building the team and how you approach that. So how have you looked at your data organization and the types of roles and worked out what you were going to need today and tomorrow?
Yeah, so I suppose we were both lucky and unlucky. So when the team started, there were only two of us, myself and a graduate. And by doing absolutely everything and by feeling all of the pain that makes up all the things that we need to do, it clarifies your thinking as to what is actually required. And so the great thing about that is it allowed us to figure out what are the different roles that we need based on the roles that we're actually doing. And what we identified is there were 4 distinct roles that we had. There was the data engineering role, which was making sure that we could ingest all the data that we wanted and then put it into a central data lake that was accessible and then maintain that data. And that's all of the traditional ELT, the extraction, load, and transformation. So how do we bring in the data and then actually make it usable? So if you're bringing it from legacy systems, can you map it so that you can actually utilize the information across the legacy systems? The second one was one of data visualization. So most of the needs that we had as an organization were historical view of what was happening. So Power BI, we were at Microsoft Shop, so Power BI was the natural solution there. So data visualization, the people within that team was all about how do we build capabilities so that people don't have to keep asking for things. It's available at their fingertips and they can look normally at historical information, and in some cases more predictive type information as well. The third is data science. So how do we leverage that data now to instill even more insights and value? So the type of example I gave using generative AI or AI would be a combination project where the data engineers would bring in the data, enrich it, and do some of the feature engineering, which is a fancy way of saying finding which things contribute to the model being smart. The data scientists would build the models, and then the data visualization people would make those models accessible via Power BI reports. And then the data engineers would feed the model output back into the workflow like a Salesforce. So we firmly believe that for us to add value to a process, we have to add value to the process. We can't just build like an additional report that someone needs to look at. We have to embed the insight into the workflow of what's being utilized so that we can maximize the likelihood that it's actually useful and it's going to be adopted as well. And then the fourth one is just data analysis. So we know that there's lots of ad hoc things that senior stakeholders or any stakeholder for that matter are going to be interested in, and we need a way and a means in which we can allow people to do that themselves, but also provide a facility that if they have a more technical or more sophisticated question they want answered, they have access to resource to do that. And that's the fourth team, the data analysis team. Our teams are primarily graduates. So we have a very strong graduate recruitment program. We bring in around 50 graduates from the UK and the US each year, and about 200 based out of India. We train them up. We put them through these 6-month rotations where they get exposed to all parts of the business and also all different business functions as well. And then if we're lucky enough, they come back to us as a deep dive, and they stay for a couple of years, and then they'll take on a permanent role. And what we firmly believe, and what I was kind of brought up, is that to be effective in anything to do with data analysis is you need coding skills, obviously. You need to understand the data, but you need domain knowledge. You need to be knowledgeable of how that information is being used and what is the pain kind of that's being experienced by the organization, so you can be effective in kind of targeting that pain. So we have exclusively quite young people that work super hard, super passionate, intellectually curious, love experimenting, and have a love of just kind of finding the clue in the data and producing these either wonderful models or these wonderful visualizations that help people to be more effective in their roles.
Okay, that all makes sense. John, it feels a little bit like this is the moment that the statistician finally has the toys that they always wanted.
Yes, certainly one of the changes over the last 20 years is the vast increase in storage and compute power available, and it's enabling. It's in some ways it's enabling things that weren't possible before, but it's certainly making orders of magnitude easier some of the things that might have been very difficult before, and that means it's a great time to start unlocking some of this value.
Glen, that is a large investment in a grad program. And so what drove the thinking in that direction, other than you'd seen that in your background in years gone by? And the reason that I say that is a lot of folks that we speak to, a lot of clients will just say, okay, well, tell me who I need to get, and I'll go to market and find those Databricks people or those Snowflake people. You've not gone down that path, and I think there's probably a good reason.
Yeah, I think there's two forces at play there. So I think one is, as an organization, we are quite lean. So ION as a whole, there's 14,000 people that work within the umbrella ION organization. It has grown by acquisition. It's acquired those companies over time. I mean, there's multiple ways in which you can invest in your workforce. You can, as you say, you can bring in those senior people. We have a relatively flat organization, so we have exec, normally managers, and then we have the doers. And in most cases, the managers are player coaches, so they're in touch enough with the technology to understand the nuances of it and the challenges that it brings, as opposed to just being purely a manager. I think the reason that we went down the graduate route is this probably like 3 or 4 different reasons. One is, I suppose, accessibility of resource. It's getting harder and harder to bring in senior people and pay those senior people what they are truly worth in a very competitive market. I think bringing younger people in that have done STEM degrees, or in some cases data science degrees, does provide the opportunity to kind of tailor the learning that you would like them to have. So in some cases, if you're bringing people in from other organizations, they might have a very different work ethic to what we have within ION. Bringing people in when they've just graduated helps, we think, instill a stronger sense of kind of community and commitment and work ethic. We love the idea of kind of investing in the future generation, in moving people around the organization as well, so that there's a book I love called the Medici effect that argues that to be effective in any role, to be really effective, it's not just the role itself you need to understand, which is why we see some people within Silicon Valley and so forth have geography degrees or geology or these kind of strange, what you would not consider intuitive degrees that would lend themselves to be very strong from a technical perspective. But when complemented with a technology degree or with a technical appreciation, it brings a very different angle of thinking to problem solving. And Elon Musk, with his kind of physics degree and his first principle thinking, is a classic example of that. So we love the idea of these graduates experiencing many different aspects of the business, so they can be very effective in their roles. So yeah, a myriad of different issues or kind of benefits that contribute towards it, and it's fun. It's fun, kind of bringing in young people that share your enthusiasm, that get excited to work on these projects. There's a great kind of cohort feel in each of the different years they come in. We've been running the graduate program since 2015 now, so it's coming up to be 10 years next year. And you get this great kind of synergy that comes from the different cohorts helping within the cohort, but also across the cohorts. So the graduates that come in have buddies and mentors that are older LDPs, so they can kind of help them skip some of the painful lessons that they learned, and hopefully spend a little bit of time, more time kind of learning and growing and developing in a slightly faster way. So similar to what, Ollie, you mentioned with respect to the kind of continuous improvement and Kaizen type approach. So yeah, we feel like we've got a pretty good grad program, and it's beneficial for us, and it's certainly very beneficial for the grads as well.
Yeah, it's a great thing. And it's great to hear that it's benefiting all concerned. I sometimes get the impression that a grad program could be seen, if you say take investment banking, for example, as the only place to start. And sometimes there are questions around interns being paid or not paid. And there's some questions around it almost being the thing you have to do to play. What I sense in your case is it's much more a let's get you started together and grow your experience and show you different elements of the business, and we'll have some fun and see where that gets you, which feels really fair and sounds like it's really paying dividends. It's a good thing. John, is there anything you'd like to ask Glenn before we come to wrap up?
I guess one main thing, I mean, you've mentioned a large focus on sort of democratization of AI, and so you've got many eyes on the subject, which is a great thing. But have you got any specific guardrails against sort of bad decisions from the models or the analysis? Because it's obviously, if you're dealing with a large amount of data, it's not, some of the conclusions that come out aren't necessarily obvious. Do you have any particular guardrails to try to catch any significant errors before they get too far?
Yeah, so I suppose there's a few different guardrails in place. So the first of which is probably the human guardrail. So like I mentioned with respect to the likely to churn model. So if we're presenting clients that we perceive at a higher risk, and we're missing ones that are at risk, then the question would be asked pretty quickly, okay, what's going on here? The other thing that we do is we always consider the use of AI and these models as an augmentation to an existing process as opposed to a replacement. So what we haven't said is only believe the model. From now on, you don't have to think. Just come in and blindly follow what the model says. What we say is we're giving you another data point, and that's part of like another kind of bugbear of mine is where people refer to data-driven organizations. So I don't believe any organization is data-driven, and I think it would be foolish for an organization to be data-driven. I think organizations are data-formed. I think and good ones are data-informed. I think data and the insights you get from data are a phenomenal data point. In the context of the wider intuition of a business leader, I think intuition still plays a large part. I think being informed by the data and being influenced by the data and allowing the data to verify or invalidate your theories or hypotheses, I think is what makes us human and what makes us effective. And I would hate to think that we'd be ever in a position where we just blindly follow what the model is telling us. And I think you get the best of both worlds there as well. So if you think about our salespeople, they're phenomenal at what they do. They have a degree of knowledge of clients, unmatched by a model that we can develop these days. But they're pushed for time. Their time is scarce. They're trying to manage existing clients and also grow accounts as well. They need a way in which they can direct their attention to where the model thinks it's appropriate, but at the same time, for them to say, "But what about this? Like, I know this is also of a concern that the model hasn't picked up." So we embrace data, we embrace the insights, we embrace all these things as another data point to help us be more data informed. But we still see technology as an enabler and as a way of augmenting us humans within the organization, and that we feel that is the best mix still to this day, and will be for at least the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Yes, well said. Okay, so before we wrap up, your final thoughts, Glenn. Perhaps some gotchas and things to be aware of for folks that are embarking on their data and AI journey.
Yeah, so the approach that we took was, don't just drink the Kool-Aid, dive into the Kool-Aid, make it into lip balm and smear it on your lips, make it into hair gel and run it through your hair, sew it into your clothes, sip on it and strain through hot water. I'm trying to think how else you could do it, but my summary is just do it, just embrace it. So technology is phenomenal, and everyone's terrible when they start with it. It's like any learned skill, and an organization needs to learn the skill of technology. AI is here to stay. It in many ways it's transformative. You'll get really good at it by doing it. There's a wonderful Aristotle quote that talks about if you want to be just, be just. If you want to be the thing that you want to be, then do it. You can't be the noun without doing the verb or being the verb. So we need to just take action. So if you've got crappy data, then try and make the data a little bit better, and then play with the different models that you can play with. If you've got data that's in a reasonable condition, then try building something. Try experimenting. If you want to do something in production or do it at a larger scale, get someone to help you with it. You'll learn so much more if you've played around yourself than if you just haven't touched it at all and just say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know where to start. Have a little bit of a play, get an appreciation for it, and then much like you've seen in adoption of other types of technology, the more kind of critical mass it builds in the market, the more range of tools become available, and you don't want to miss that. So you just want to make sure that you're upskilling your people, that they have an appreciation for it. Hackathons are a great way of starting as well. You never know who's going to emerge from the woodwork that actually is good at coding or wants to get into coding. So there's lots of ways you can get started, lots of ways in which third parties can help you get started. But I would just say, just get started, just jump in and enjoy. It's pretty fantastic. Some of the amazing tools that are becoming available. It's pretty incredible what you can do with it. It's just an exciting time to be leveraging technology in a way that's allowing people to be far more creative and be removed from some of the more administrative kind of burdensome type activities that they've done for many years. So yeah, I would just say get started, get in there, have some fun.
Thank you for that. A warming and enthusiastic view from somebody who's really doing it. That I think is really promising for the state of the tech and the sorts of innovative ways we'll see organizations and their teams starting to work with it in the years to come. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, John. And thank you, folks, for listening. We've got plenty of episodes coming up, so don't forget to subscribe and look after each other. Until next time.